One, two, three, four.
You are listening to SKYLIT, the SKYLIT Books podcast. SKYLIT Books is a general interest bookstore in the Los Feliz neighborhood in Los Angeles. You can shop with us from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. or visit us online 24/7 at skylitbooks.com. Follow along at SKYLIT Books Instagram and Twitter. You can subscribe to the podcast on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Thank you for listening, and now on to the episode.
Hello, my beautiful and lovely listeners, and welcome to SKYLIT. This is the SKYLIT Books podcast, and I'm your host, Lance Morgan. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Joan Nockels Wilson to read from her new book, The Book of Timothy, The Devil, My Brother, and Me, followed by a conversation with the both of us after. Joan Nockels Wilson is a writer and lawyer, a native of Chicago and a forever learner. She has studied at the Northwestern University, University of California, Berkeley, Lewis and Clark College, and the University of Alaska. She holds a Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Nonfiction, is a Rasmussen Foundation Individual Artist Award winner, and is a member of the Red Loaf community of writers. Her work has appeared in literary journals and audio shows, most recently Cirque and Arctic Entries. She lives with her husband, daughter, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong, a Vizsla named Vivian in Anchorage, Alaska. This is her first book. Joan, welcome. And did I pronounce it
Hi,
right?
Lance. Vizsla.
Vizsla.
Very close. Yeah.
I got it. Is it Russian? Is that
It's a Hungarian bird
Hungarian?
dog. Most people know a Weimaraner, which are gray. Vizslas are all shades of rust. They're absolutely beautiful.
Oh, that sounds beautiful. Now I got to brush up on my Hungarian. To all my listeners, to all my Hungarian listeners out there, I apologize.
That's all right. And the only word I know in Hungarian is Vizsla. So
Vizsla.
There we go.
So look at us. Look at that. The representation, right? Joan, thank you so much for being on today. I'm so excited. This is going to be such a great conversation. I feel it already.
I'm looking forward to it, Lance. I agree too.
Well, you have a reading for us today, right?
Yes. And I think for this reading, it makes sense to start in the beginning. Perfect. So we are going to begin in Rome. April 22nd, 2012, a Sunday. I'm boarding the Leonardo Express, the commuter train from Fiumicino Airport to the Termini train station in central Rome. It's 4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, and although it's April, 2 weeks after Easter, I expect it to be darker outside. This is a distinctive trait of an Alaskan. Despite change in latitude, I still expect darkness everywhere and every time. How did I get to Rome? The simple answer is that it took 38 hours with a layover in Chicago, my birthplace, to gather blessings. Or shall I say curses? And isn't life more complex than the Alaska Airlines Flight 30 to British Airways Flight 4 to Alitalia Flight 110 answer? Don't trips like this really begin 10 years prior, devouring for me my late 30s and making all of the 40s I've lived so far a mess for a healthy relationship of any kind? And my brother, his saga began well before he really had a chance, behind a closed door that should have been opened, on a twin bed that should have slept one, under the watch of St. Michael, who supposedly stood ready to battle. Isn't this where tragic stories really begin? Under the theoretical custody of a guardian angel who could not have cared less? Or rather, under the watchful eye of a wolf in shepherd's clothing, the one who left the 99 grazing peacefully in the verdant pasture to terrorize that solitary, frightened, honey-made, lost lamb. In the words of the Apostle John, isn't this the true? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Start to it all. I don't have to say it here, not yet. You must know what I'm talking about by my use of certain words and images. The angel who missed his mark, the actual meaning of to sin, the closed door, the wolf. Did I say with a Roman collar? The small bed, and my even smaller brother. You know that story can't be a good one. But what should be picked up, in case you might have missed the cues, the allusions, not a sin in this context, is the fact that I can't say it, admit it, right here from the start. That is also the story. Like so many years ago, I'm on the outside looking in, fearful of what I might see, more fearful of what I might say, even more terrified that I might do nothing. Yet today on the Leonardo Express, I am once again the faithful sister. I'd given up this mantle for a time as well. But after a lawsuit against a priest, a religious order, and an archdiocese that brought no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and at my brother's simple and complex request, so that no other child may suffer alone, I've made telling my brother's story, Tim's story, my personal mission. In this task, his story has seemingly become my own. And when it comes to me, I know the ending too well. It can only come with confrontation. With the exception of a trained assassin, who better to confront a serial child abuser than me? Please let it be noted, for I see the folly. I am the only one here, not Tim on a train to an eternal city without the ability to get on with it. I am the lost lamb with a backpack and a computer bag on a pilgrimage to the Congregazione della Passione di Gesù Cristo to find him, the priest banished to his order's religious headquarters nearly a decade ago. I asked myself then, why with this focus on fathers do I think of my mother? Be careful, child. I can hear her calling. Aboard the Leonardo, I found my window seat, left side vinyl torn, and I've released the backpack and computer bag tethered to my jet-lagged body. She calls to me again. Be careful. As the train leaves the airport grounds, I want her here for my own comfort, no one else's. I open my computer bag, reach inside, and feel for the small portfolio of photos I've carried with me. Here are the reminders of the reasons I need to make it home. My husband, Richard, and our 4 messy dogs, the Chugach Mountains, my Sitka spruce forest of a yard. I pause only briefly at the most important reason, the photograph of my 3-year-old daughter, Abby. With her open arms, she's reaching for me, I can tell, but it seems I'm always a foot away, just out of camera range, life range. Even at this moment, mother that I am, I flip past her. I turn needingly to the photo of my mother holding me. In it, Mary Catherine Blackburn Nockels is just 32, currently 15 years my junior. Her short cropped hair is auburn. She wears a bright red poppy-colored sweater, and I'm cradled within the crook of her elbow. Mouth open, eyes looking to her as she's feeding me. I know from another photo that captures that same sweater, kitchen, and mother's touch that this moment occurred at my sister Teresa's 3rd birthday party. So I, a Thursday child, am just over 2 months old. Despite this, my mother appears to be done nursing me. There is a spoon going into my tiny upturned mouth. The benefits of long-term breastfeeding aside, however, Mom looks content, as if on this day, I am gloriously all she ever asked for. I note that until my law school graduation, 33 years in the future, this is the one and only photo I have of solely the two of us. And so for the next 30 minutes, through city outskirts, by cramped, efficient, nameless buildings, across the mud lawn Tiber River, this is how time passes, just she and I, together. Be careful, child. At Termini, I follow the crowd of casual Romans from track 26, and with Chicago city sense suddenly engaged, I make my way, relatively stress-free, through long corridors and down escalators to the subterranean metro station. I look over the subway map to find my destination. Here it is. In one direction, Rebabia. In the other, my other, his other, Laurentina. This is Linnea Bay, the blue line. Blue. Blue means careful, child. Attento, per favore. Blue means petrofino and paralyzed. Blue means anger, revenge, and action loaded upon itself of unadulterated violence. Blue means oxygenless blood, what I may in fact be seeking. Is this what I'm seeking? I must be better than a death wish. Remembering the inscription Richard Rodriguez wrote just a year ago in my torn copy of his Days of Obligation, for Joan, learn not to be afraid, St. Ignatius, I willed myself back to contemplative understanding. Blue. Blue means coincidence, calm, and courage. Blue means an act of belief, really an act of resolute faith. Blue means the ending, here at the beginning. And I'm soon to learn, in 3 days' time, from a fresco of the Madonna. Here she is, the mother again, beneath the papal apartments. That blue means high holiness, purity even.
Wow, that was, I mean, reading it's one thing, but hearing it, is powerful. Just the emotion that I could feel it through that. Wow. Well, thank you, Joan, for
Thank you.
being on today. How are you doing today?
I am doing just fine. What am I? May I mention that this is a few days before the book launch? So as a first-time real published author, I have every fear and trepidation, but I also have great joy. I was talking to a friend of mine last night, and she said to me, "How are you?" And I said, "I'm afraid." And she said, "Only part of you is afraid. The rest of you can be joyous." So yeah. So that's how I'm going to take the time that I'm talking about the book of Timothy and the mission of my brother and me, and the hope that we have for this book and how it might actually achieve my brother's request.
No, I mean,
so no other child would suffer.
And that's a great answer, I think. Especially
Okay.
your friend. That's great advice from your friend too. Only a part of you is afraid and a part of you is joyous. And I think that's great. That's right. It's an accomplishment to finish a book like this. So wow. No matter what, no one could take that away from you, right?
And this one began, after, it's kind of said that, with the lawsuit and all these agreements that victims of clergy abuse enter into. There's a boilerplate, we admit to no wrongdoing, and that really upset my brother, and understandably so. So when we finished that process, and because criminal statutes of limitations blocked criminal prosecution, he said, "What do we do next?" And I said, "Tell your story." So that was almost 20 years ago, Lance.
Wow.
It'll be 20 years this April. And I like to say, promises made, promises finally kept. So a lot in the middle there, but here we are.
And I feel like that's so, there's a just a double-edged sword there with you know, you got to tell this story, but like, you know, so the justice of it is just so wrong in so many ways. And I mean, reading this book, I was like, wow, the anger I felt, I was like, can I swim to the Vatican right now and just like start fighting? Just like, you know, it's that anger sometimes. I mean, and for the past year and a half that I feel like also feel that anger where I just, you
Right.
know, it just, but this is, and honestly before with I mean, this topic is not um something that is new, you know what I mean? Something
Right.
that is just coming out. It's been around, but it's still like, you know, it seems like the justice process in this is just so stretched out, and you know,
Yeah,
there's
you've
little
said
to no
that.
help.
Yeah. The reason my brother came forward is when the boys in Boston finally came forward.
Hmm.
He realized what happened to them happened to
Hmm.
him. A part of him
Hmm.
always knew that, but people are very good of compartmentalizing.
Yes.
And then I always thought, well, when is the time for this story? You know, is it when Pope Francis became Pope? Is it,
Hmm.
I don't know what is going on now. Cardinal McCarrick,
Hmm.
this report in France of the years of sexual abuse of children there. I think
Hmm.
60 years, 7,000 victims, if that, maybe
Hmm.
more. Then I realized there's always going to be a time for this story. It never ends. And Lance,
Yeah.
I promise you, sitting here today, it's happening in other parts of the world, in
Yeah.
places where Catholicism is just growing, where becoming a priest is a means of power.
Yeah.
And I have no doubt there's a child in probably East Asia, maybe some parts of Africa. And
Hmm.
I don't want us to forget that. I don't want
Yes.
people to think this is over because bishops in the United States say, you know, we report all abuse.
Yeah.
The other thing
Hmm.
that's not over is the people within the Catholic Church who try to go to Mass, who
Hmm.
still try to participate, but a good part of the congregation really wants this to be yesterday's story. They
Yes.
want it to be yesterday's news. And often,
Hmm.
even when people try to re-engage with their faith, they feel like they're
Hmm.
being swept under their carpet.
Yeah.
Um, One thing every time I go, which is very, very rare, is there's a, a prayer after the acts of the after the Apostles' Creed, where
Hmm.
it's a number of prayers, and the second one is always for the Pope and priest, and I always think, and the third one at every Mass in every church across the world should be for victims of clergy sex abuse,
Yes.
but they won't do it. You know, they won't
Hmm.
signify it.
And
So we have to.
we have to. And like one of the things I was telling you before we recorded was that I also come from uh I have a background in Catholicism myself, Catholic school for years.
Mhm.
And you know, it felt like in that space too, when we were like looking at the time frame, and we're like, I was, you know, one of the first generations to come to be in like a Catholic space, hearing about, you know, all of these crimes being committed in the
Right.
Catholic Church. And like how I felt like, and one thing I remember from it is like the gaslighting and the, you know, the, it felt like a conspiracy of like so many people, deacons who taught me, and you know, priests in there just trying to like also sweep it on the rug and like make us as like a young a younger body in the Catholic in Catholicism, try to like, you know, shape us into not believing this is true and all of
Mm,
this. And I feel like, you know, with my generation and even the generation younger than me, in the connectivity with all of this, it's not working. There's so many people I know who are my age who have also been like, you know, raised in Catholicism,
yeah.
who are like, no, this is bullshit to use
You know,
to
that's really interesting that you say that because I think about when this priest was in my parish when we were growing up, all the children could sense something wrong. It
Mhm.
was the adults who couldn't. And what you said about, your teachers in that generation kind of wanting you to forget and, oh, that's yesterday, don't worry. And yet those future generations you included and this one now are like, oh, I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah.
So I think there's a sense of a child that recognizes that injustice, that this is this picture isn't reflecting what I'm really seeing. And I guess that's encouraging to me.
Yeah, no, it's encouraging seeing, like, it feels, sometimes, some days it feels like, we're not, like, there's little progress happening and there's not much movement. But then, like, something like this, I remember, oh no, these stories are getting out there and people are listening and people are believing, and younger people are going to be like, younger people, like these teenagers on TikTok. I feel like I talk about them all the time on this podcast because they every day astound me. Every day I'm like, how did they know this and I didn't? And it's because they want to be informed. They're on TikTok making funny videos, but they're also making like videos that are educational and videos that are like teaching people how to like think differently about things that we've been taught to think about, and things that like have been like, not told. So yeah.
And you mentioned, we've gone through the history of this. We've had the great movie, Blind Spot. I think this is the time we'll be seeing personal narratives like this one. I hope there's more of them.
I mean, there's, and not maybe specifically like
Spotlight, not Blind Spot. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
Go ahead.
You're good. No, there are books. I just last year read Yad Gyasi. I always pronounce her last name wrong. Her book Transcending Kingdom, which I don't know if you've read that one, but it was about like, oh, it's a fantastic book. But it's about like this immigrant family looking for community through the church, but they're like, it's like the racism they face there. There's another book that was actually given to me by some professor I had in high school when I was in the Catholic church, in the Catholic school, and it was A Land More Kind Than Home, and it's like about like people who are in power in who are like in power, and how they like are using that power for evil as a leader of the church, and like how it like small towns kind of rely on this, and how like there are people in the church who like use that power for their own personal gain. And it's just there's so many good.
Right. I'm looking at a book right now called Paper Cuts by Stephen Bernard. That's another one to put on your list of firsthand stories.
There's there's narratives of good and honest critiques of the church, and it that I think needs to be talked about.
Can I say this though? And you can so I'm reading, I'm not going to tell you the name of the book I'm reading, but I'm reading a book where this person had a completely different life than mine, where they exact same age. And, it was a story of feeling of abandoned. And she says in the book that she doesn't believe in God. And I get that. Growing up in a family of 7, I can tell you at one point a child is abandoned in a family of 7. It's just going to happen with that many. But the positive thing from my perspective is I never felt alone, because despite what I'm telling in this story, I got a strong faith, and I just feel blessed to have had that. So while I'm here to criticize and shine the light, I partially can do that because I feel it's my job, and somebody wants me to do that.
Well, I mean, there's the separation of religion and church, which I think is so important. I mean, and with the like, not to like, this is like in his earlier career, and not to talk about his recent beliefs and publicity, but Kanye West had a great song the Jesus Walks, which talks about like how like the church is corrupt, and how there's people that like how like God has how the church in some ways has abandoned the teachings of God,
Yeah.
and like God in its essence, because there's so much like hypocrisy and
Right.
evil and all this
Hypocrisy,
stuff.
power, and money. Put those
Yes.
three together, and I don't care how good you are,
Yeah.
something's going to get you. So,
No, there's a
so
separation of, I think there needs, I mean, I feel like
yeah,
it needs to be talked about, the separation between religion and church, because
yeah.
at this point it needs to be, maybe there needs to be more of a separation there, you know what I mean? But I
Well,
also
I think that TikTok generation, like you said, if they believe
Mhm,
in God, because I hear there's a good portion who don't. I think they're
mhm.
called the nuns. The way I heard it explained, they're the ones to do it. They're the
Yeah.
ones to do it.
And I mean, there's and even friends of mine who are like, members of the Catholic Church and members of
Mm-hmm.
just like certain religions, they're very critical of it too. They are not they are, one, not judgmental of people who are agnostic, atheistic,
Mm-hmm.
believe in other religions. No. And a lot of friends of mine who are also like, they love books too, they love reading about other religions, because they're not trying to close themselves off from it, but
Right.
they also understand the criticisms of the Catholic Church and are very critical of it. And I think that makes for a better community, because it's like, it's the same thing, I think. I mean, there's a I think direct relationship between government politics and church politics, in the sense of, if the people are critical and are watching what's happening, there will be change. Um,
Yeah,
and I
I think you've
think
got that.
and I yeah, no, but
Yeah.
I mean, and I love this discussion about the church, and I want to go on about it, but I also want to talk about you in this book.
Let's go somewhere else.
Let's go somewhere
Okay.
else. Let's have some fun,
Yeah.
change it up. No, I want to talk
Yeah.
about this book because it's amazing. And I mean, when I first read up on this book and I first heard about this book, the first word that came to mind, and please tell me if I'm wrong, and it's only because I also feel like this would be a reaction I would have in this scenario, but the first thing that came to mind was revenge, in a way.
Very
Is
good. Yeah.
I I just, it's because like that's how I'd be like, I'd want to burn it down. I'd want to
Right.
burn down the everything that man touched. I would want to burn down.
That's a
And
wonderful word. Yeah.
yeah, and could you, it was that anywhere in your mind
Could I
with,
expand on that?
yes,
Yeah.
please.
So I didn't say it in the prologue, but I've spent a portion of my career as a criminal prosecutor.
Hmm.
So I went to Rome having that in my history
Hmm.
with a plan of how to kill this man. And
Right.
I took great pleasure in it. I took
Hmm.
great pleasure in the plan.
Hmm.
I also, should I, well, the fact I'm sitting here in Alaska probably tells you that I'm not in prison, probably
Yeah.
tells you my ultimate choice.
Yeah.
But I could picture the entire case against me.
Hmm.
What would happen from the moment I did it, where I would be taken, the kind of
Hmm.
questioning I would get,
Hmm.
the evidence they would be able to find of my crime,
Hmm.
and how they would figure it out.
Hmm.
And if the reader reads on in this book, I actually argue for my freedom,
Hmm.
make an argument to the jury about
Hmm.
why I did what I did and why it was the right thing to do. So yes, revenge was the power of this book. Now,
Hmm.
another reason I went to Rome and not my brother is my brother would not have come home. He would have done what I did not do.
Hmm.
So, and I love him too much to let anything like that happen to him.
Yes. I
Yeah.
I mean, what that one, wow. I mean, I 100% understand. I One thing that also made me very attracted to this book, attracted to like wanting to do this podcast and have you on, is because my best friend in the whole world is my little brother. And
Mhm.
I my best friend, and I remember he used to play, he played hockey for his entire
Mhm.
life. And I remember watching his hockey games and seeing like people check him in the hockey game, which is like they slam him against the
Mhm.
wall, or they get into fights.
You're talking
And
to an Alaskan. We know those.
oh
Go
yeah,
ahead.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I'd be
Go
like,
ahead.
oh wow, number 13, I know, I'll see you off the court and we'll fight. We'll fight. I'm like, you might be
Yeah.
younger than me, but I'll still fight you. No, I mean that idea of just like, he's my best friend, he's my little brother, we've
Yeah.
known each other our entire lives. There's no one in the world I like, there's no one in the
Yeah.
world I would
I
fight
got it.
for as like I'd fight for him. And that made me I connected to that in your book. And I also, so I understand everything you're saying. And if I was on that jury, I'd be like, innocent, get her off she's free to go. Free
She's
to
free.
go.
She gets an applause. Yeah.
She gets an applause, give her money, give
Yeah.
her some money to like, to compensate travel and any expenses she's had.
Right.
No, I mean,
I think when I was there, Amanda Knox was still in prison, if I recall, but I might be wrong about that. Go ahead.
I mean,
Yeah.
for the listeners, could you,
Mhm.
and if you can't, this is totally understandable, could you give a background on what happened with your brother, and
Sure.
a short one, so
Yeah.
they have to read the book, and they, going
Right.
into the book and going to the podcast, they have an idea.
Yeah. So we grew up in the Northwest side of Chicago, 3-generation Chicago firefighting family. Do you need, should we take a
No,
pause here? I don't know if you hear my dog in the
no, that's
background.
good. You're all good. That
Okay.
adds to the Alaskan essence, I think.
I will tell you she's barking because there's a bull moose in the yard. So that is a definite Alaskan
That's,
story.
and for our non-Alaskan listeners, it's probably so cool.
So church was a huge part of our family. My mother was going to be a nun. My dad was going to be a priest. Neither went that route, but they did marry and have 7 children and sent us to Catholic school from first grade on. It was a sign of honor, a badge of honor, if you, as a parishioner, were befriended by a priest, and that priest took in your family and would start visiting you. And that was basically the story. My father, in addition to being a fireman with 7 children, worked maintenance at another church, and the priest found my father and basically groomed him to come over and work for him, doing maintenance at our home church, and groomed him for the reason that children were his real aim. So while abuse also happened in the rectory, it happened in my brother's bedroom. He would come home. He would come over for dinner. Afterward, he would go into my brother's room. And when I asked my parents why he's in there, they said, Tim is broken. He needs spiritual counseling. So I think it's fair to say that went on for 2.5 to 3 years. And when he finished with my brother, there were more children to take his place.
Wow. And I mean, that's, wow. There's one, thank you for sharing that, one, in your book, and to right now on this podcast, because I can only imagine how you must feel right now. And wow. Revisiting this and looking back on the history of this, and I can only imagine your family too, looking back, having to like revisit this with your book too. How, not you specifically, because you were also a child like your brother, but how must this have, how do you think that like writing this book would, you know, have a reaction from your family? How would your family react to it?
So part of the book, if I'm honest, it doesn't just burn the priest, it burns the entire generation, like my
Mhm.
parents and my teachers and my parents' friends who should have seen what was obvious
Yeah.
and did not.
Mhm.
And my parents have passed away. I will tell you this. I mean, it's in the book, but when my brother was 16, he told my father what happened. And my father told him to never speak that way about a priest again. And Tim didn't for 20 years. When my father came to the realization of what he did, that was heartbreaking.
Mhm.
And I will say, after the book kind of chronicles, what happened to what child, who knew what, and
Mhm.
going through it and talking to people at the time, I think a lot of them are feeling relief, actually. A lot of them now have guilt, and
Mhm.
I think they think it's part of their penance to share their responsibility.
Yeah.
So I know, when I knew what happened, when I learned my father's role, and my mother knew as well, I had no forgiveness in my heart for them.
Mhm.
My brother forgave very early, and he said it just wasn't in their capability. And I will tell you, it took until their death for me to finally forgive them.
Mhm.
Um, but only because I could somewhat put myself in their place, and only
Mhm.
because I saw their living, Catholics say this, their living penance here on earth.
Mhm. No.
I think a lot of people in this generation,
Mhm.
that older generation, I'm kind of the older generation now. I still think of myself as 20, Lance, so
I mean,
we'll have to
what
change.
you know
Yeah.
what? B20. You're
Okay.
you're B20.
I will. I think I know in my home parish, there's a lot of kind of, I think, excitement, and there'll be voices and readers that I really care hearing what they think. So,
Yeah. And you know what? I shouldn't have limited it to like family, because this is a whole community of
mhm,
people affected by this um by
mhm.
by this man and this you know
Yeah.
the system of abuse. How have you have you prepared for that kind of reaction from your community yet?
Yes. So, and it's interesting because I've been talking to a lot of friends are helping, bring people to my events in Chicago.
Mhm.
And a number of them say, when you meet this person, you may not know this, but this happened to them and this happened to them. And it made us think that we really need to help the audience,
Mhm.
the direct victims in there. And I was talking to a friend, a very good friend last night, and um, she said, well, why don't you say this to them? Um, there are a lot of ghosts in this room. We know that, but there are a lot of helpers too, in physical and spiritual form.
Mhm.
And I thought about that. And that's the preparation I want to give to anyone who listens to this, be it a podcast, a virtual um, book reading, an in-person book reading, or reading the book for themselves.
Mhm.
I know your ghosts, and I know there are helpers there for you too.
Mhm.
So let's do this together.
Yeah. And I think, that's a community in itself too, to like, it's
Mhm.
the community is what got hurt by this, but the community, might be the one to heal it too. Like,
Mhm.
it's a community is not like, it doesn't it can change, it can reshape and
Yeah.
help
Can
each other
can I
out.
say this? One of my greatest fears, however, is
Mhm.
um, this, and I think I have an answer to it, but it's still a fear.
Mhm.
I don't want anybody to think my story is more important than the boys or the young
Mhm.
women that this happened to. This is
Mhm.
their story, but the
Right.
I spent 3 years, by the way, trying to learn to tell their story, and it took me a while to realize the only story I can tell is my own.
Right.
So that's why this is my story of what happened to my brother, my family, my community,
Right.
my beautiful city of Chicago.
Mhm.
But I enter that space very, very humbly, and
Mhm.
and realize it's a different viewpoint. I haven't read any books like this. I don't know if
Mhm.
you have, of the kind of the sister, we're called secondary victims. You know,
Mhm.
you're throwing the stone in the water, and we're the next
Yeah.
circle of harm. But
Mhm.
that's probably the community I'm most concerned about. This spring, I'll
Mhm.
be going up to Bethel, Alaska, which is a town that was decimated by abuse. The Jesuit order sent all their
Mhm.
priests that were abusing people in the lower 48 up to these small Alaska Native villages.
Mhm.
And that's a conversation I think the conversation is going to be a lot of silence and
Mhm.
reverence.
Mhm.
But that one's very important to me.
And I mean, I completely understand you and you wanting to make sure that it's said that it's the stories of these victims. And I've seen, maybe not in this specific circumstance, but I've seen stories of secondary victims too. And like for like I think of
Lance, I
like
need your reading list. You have to send me all these books that we talk about.
I 100% will. I mean,
Okay.
there's so many good ones, but I think of like TV too. There's a lot of good representation of like family of like alcoholics and drug
Mm-hmm.
addicts, and
Right.
family of, and like even what addiction means and what it's like, how it affects like the community as a whole. Victims are people who suffer from mental illness, and how
Mm-hmm.
like their family also has to like come together, but it's like that's how a community works, I think, where it's like
Yeah.
one person, well, if one person suffers, it's a reverb of like all of it, it does affect everyone around them, not as much, not to the extent of the victim, but like there is, if you care about someone, their hurt is your hurt
Yeah.
in some ways.
Well, you just
And
put me at ease. Thank you.
no, I mean, and I think that and I don't want to like, get make you make, because I don't think you would want this to be the hero
Right.
story
I
of
do
this.
not.
But there is something admirable about you also, not letting them be also because there's probably a lot of them who don't want to be the face of this story, the ones who are dragging the something that like what they went through, like people are going
Right.
to be criticizing it, commenting on it, but you in a way putting yourself as the one who gets criticized, and the one who gets commented on, and the one who people are going to be, in a way that their story also gets to be told, which I think that will be so important for them to
That's,
see. And you get to like, take on
oh,
that burden for them in a way. And
and that
that's,
I like that. And
yeah.
one thing I had to be honest about this book, and I hope the reader finds it, is brutally honest about myself. You know,
Mhm.
what part of me am I so egotistical that I have to be the great rescuer? I attacked that part of my character,
Mhm.
and um, so if I'm going to be on that stage, I want people to know that the self-criticism is
Yeah.
there as well, and
Yeah.
people are free to go on top of it, because I've dealt with it for years and kind of
Mhm.
have an answer, but it's still a good point.
I mean, and I don't want to
Yeah.
at all. I won't. If that answer is internal for you, I don't want to press into
Oh,
that.
yeah.
But I also, it reminds me of like, there's this episode of for the sitcom Friends,
Uh-huh.
and I'm now coming out as a fan of, a past huge fan of the show Friends. But there's this episode where they're like, there's no, they like, one of the characters tries to prove that their good deeds can happen. You could do something good without like benefiting from it, and trying to prove another character wrong. And like, they get into this like say commie thing about it. But I also think that there is a conversation about that. What makes a good thing?
Uh-huh.
Can you do good things and feel good about like yourself in doing it too? It's like, and I think that that's true. Two things can exist. You're
Yeah.
like doing a good thing and feeling happy for yourself of doing this good thing for others. It's like what is it? There's no non-selfless good deed. Does that make sense?
That makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah. And
There's
also,
no
if you say that everything, I'm not going to say everything happens for a reason, but
yeah.
a good can come out of evil. That's for
The
sure.
good can come out of evil. And
Yeah.
like I have to imagine your relationship with your brother has also become even closer and
Mhm.
changed into something I hope that both of you can like, you know, look look at and be like, oh, this horrible, terrible event happened, but at least I found out that I have someone here who will fight for me.
Yeah.
And like that's what's important. And I get it in the same way of like I would burn down the world if something happened like
Happened
that
to
to
your
my
brother.
brother.
Yeah.
Burn down the world. And I mean, there's so many things about it. And I feel like that's also the Catholicism guilt coming out, that old good old Catholic guilt always around the corner. It also pounded to us from
Right.
a young age. But like that, it's like there's no help in. And I don't want to say that because it's your journey and if this is, I don't want to like make a statement on your behalf, but like there's
What?
no good in like being so critical of yourself in that way
Oh,
too, because
that's kind.
there's no
Yeah.
good in it, because there's only good in the actions.
So
And
can I tell you my answer of how I kind
yes,
of,
yes,
yeah.
yes, yes.
Um, it's also the same answer. I think I was mentioning to you earlier that I was telling a friend was asking how I was doing, and I said
Mhm,
terrified, and she laughed and she said, only part of you is terrified.
mhm,
So it's almost the same answer, that there is part of me that can critically look at what I've done,
mhm,
um, the place I put myself in. But if
mhm,
anyone thinks that that act didn't come out of love, then
mhm.
they don't that's not the story.
Yeah.
So I think when you act out of love, true love, in this case, filial love, brotherly love,
Mhm.
um, you're good.
Yeah.
So
And
that's where I came down.
yeah.
And you can take pride in what you did. Pride
Mhm.
is, I'm not going to fall because of my pride. I've got enough, like you said,
Yeah.
Catholic guilt. I just call it the voice in the back of your head that makes
Yeah.
you, look at yourself. Sometimes
Mhm.
it can get really cruel, but other times it can be very, very helpful.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's what a beautiful way to look at it. Love is,
Yeah.
and I feel like love is also, even when I said at the beginning that like I saw the book and I thought revenge, I
Hmm.
there was love there. There was like it's because of the overpowering love that I felt in how I feel about my brother and how I feel about and how our relationship is. It's love. And that's even
Yeah.
that it comes out of love. It all, and like I just the I love it. I love it. Um
And now I want your reading list on books about brother and sisterly love. I haven't seen a lot of those. There's this wonderful book called Name All the Animals by Allison
mhm,
Smith. She talks about her close relationship with her brother.
yeah.
Um, but I think that's something different about this book too. If people are looking for different,
Mhm. To go,
that's one. Yeah.
yeah, and I will give you that what I think. I'm like now I'm trying to be like, what is a good sisterly love book?
Well,
I
yeah.
I
There'll
will
be
I will get
movies. We
back to
could
you on
think
that
of movies
list.
about
We'll
it.
think of
Yeah, I'm
movies,
certain there
and
are.
there has to be so much.
Right. And there are
Well,
more brother and brother love. I get that.
yeah,
So I can
right.
picture you and your brother together taking
Oh
the world
yeah.
by storm. Yeah.
No, it's so funny. I tell people all the time, me and my brother are complete opposites, and
Hmm.
there is no reason why we're so close as we are, because me and him were having this conversation yesterday and now, but I'm
Hmm.
like, I know that makes me that I just it's so great that two people like me and him who are so different, have this
Yeah.
tight bond.
And yeah. And I don't know if you can tell I like talking. So my brother is the complete opposite. So I get it.
Wow.
He's a quiet force of nature. But
Mm.
when he talks, it's like
Yeah.
that E.F. Hutton commercial. You want to listen because he's got
Oh
something
wow.
to say. Yeah.
That's great. That's amazing too.
Yeah.
Um, I want to talk about for a little. I want to talk about your own history, your
Sure.
career as a lawyer, because I feel like there has to have been such direct connection. Even you were bringing up earlier, where you were when you went there, when you went to Rome, you were already, your lawyer's sense was coming in, and like, how do I know what to do in this scenario, and I know these arguments I have, and it's in the book, but I want to hear how, like, even throughout the entire book, your lawyer sense, like, I feel like that's
Sure.
the lawyer version of a spidey sense. Your lawyer sense came into play.
um, sure. So almost everything about me goes back to my family. But growing up in a family of 7, one of the nice things back then is we all sat down to eat together. But
Mhm.
my father and I could clear the table because he would take a very conservative viewpoint. I would take a liberal. We were yelling at each other, and everyone would leave the table. And then he and I got to eat dessert alone. It was it was a lovely, lovely relationship in that way.
Mhm.
Which also is why I politically, I love everyone, because I know
Mhm.
people have different viewpoints on things, but
Mhm.
it's like, oh, I think I can argue, so that's the beginning of lawyer Joan.
Mhm.
It came from family. And my career, I grew up in Chicago. I went to Northwestern University for undergrad. I think I was mentioning earlier that I figured out I was a country mouse born in a city mouse's
Yes.
body very early in my life. And I came up to Alaska at the age of 21. I took my college degree and became a dog musher and a fish slimer. So I did a great job with that. And then I went to graduate school to study jurisprudence and social policy, because I like the relation between law and history. When does history
Mhm.
when do people lead the law? When does law lead people? Um,
Right.
Throughout that process, I realized I wasn't a ivory tower person, and there was only one place I wanted to live. And I didn't want to go on the whole university searches for jobs, so I switched over, got my law degree,
Mhm.
and have been practicing now for 25 years.
Wow.
I've been in, at the time of this book, I was
Mhm.
associate in a national law firm.
Mhm.
I've been a chief ethics officer for a hospital. Um,
Mhm.
I've been a prosecutor. I spend my passion, however, is in public service. So I'd say the majority of my career, and where it ends, and where it will end when I retire and after my daughter graduates a long time from now, is as an assistant attorney general for the state of Alaska.
Wow.
In that capacity, I've prosecuted, I luckily get to continue to be in the courtroom prosecuting Medicaid fraud. If people know the
Wow.
hoverboard dentist case, Google it. It was on every comedy show, every Jimmy Kimmel, etc.
Mhm.
Um, that was my case. And now I currently, because I've been practicing law for so long, it's really important to do new things. And I currently
Mhm.
represent 2 boards in Alaska, and I call them the vice boards. I represent
Mhm.
the marijuana control board and the alcoholic beverage control board. And it's so fun. It's so fun.
Wow.
So that's what I do now. And I throw in some prosecution just to keep me in the courtroom. Is that what you were wondering?
Yeah, and like,
Yeah.
yes, your background, but also like when you were throughout the book,
Uh-huh.
because I imagine like you came at it as a sister, as a person who
Yeah.
loves this, loves your brother and wants to see justice done, but also as a lawyer who did was there any part of you as a lawyer that was like, I also want to see justice done in this
Okay.
sense too?
Yeah. I could think so. An important part of the story was first doing the fact finding,
Mm-hmm.
the putting together the case.
Mm-hmm.
And that case would include what happened to my brother, what happened to the other boys, what happens to
Mm-hmm.
boys I continue to hear about.
Mm-hmm.
So enough to say, yes, this happened without any degree of doubt, not even
Mm-hmm.
reasonable doubt. No degree of doubt,
Right.
which made it important. And then when it came to kind of put to what degree was my lawyer's skills there, in my confrontation, I wrote how the questions I would be asking, much in the same fashion I might be able to ask a question of a criminal offender who didn't take the Fifth Amendment. What, when you did this, and why did you do this, and how did you do this? So, and when it came to points in the conversation where there was not the reaction I expected, the litigator came out and took that moment by storm. So it's the fact gathering. Another thing I did is I had this old mentor, he's passed away, but he used to always say, after you build up your case, you have to break it down. You have to take it down yourself. So after I built up my case, I broke it down, found every weakness in it, and built it up with supporting facts. I always knew that I went to Rome knowing, some people are like, did you know it would be a story? I went to Rome knowing this would be a story. I presented myself to the priest in a way that made him think I was probably a very, very nice person. But my intent was to tell the story. And in telling it, telling his version of the story, at least the parts that he wanted to say. So someone will read this and hear his rendition. Do I agree with his rendition? No, I do not. But the fairness is there. And like, if you're going to accuse someone, give them their moment. And as a lawyer, fairness is very important to me, especially as a government lawyer, because the government has so much power over individuals. So I want due process for everyone. And then, writing my closing argument to get out of Kanani prison there in central Rome if needed.
Yeah. And again, put me on that jury and I will advocate.
I will.
No,
I'm good. I'm gonna look for you, Lance. Yeah.
Yes, please, please.
That would be fun, wouldn't it? When you commit a crime, you could just call your friends. It's like, okay, all right, Lance, I want you.
Let's go to Supreme Court. Let's bring this up with them. I think that we have a powerful case for doing that. But that's only because I just watched 7 seasons of The Good Wife. So
very good.
I think I get it. In my head, the same way that like watching all of Grey's Anatomy makes me think I'm a doctor.
Sorry, I was drinking water when you said that. Yeah, I told you I watched 15 seasons of Criminal Minds, so I'm very good. I know what an unsub is now. Yeah, and
Between us, we are a doctor, a lawyer, an investigator. Like, let's do this. Yeah. We got it all covered.
Yeah.
No, sadly, we have to finish up soon.
Okay.
I'm so sad because this has been such a fantastic conversation. But the last thing I wanna ask you, and it's kind of a question for you, but also to bring to the audience, in the audience of this podcast and the audience of your book. What out of all this evil, out of everything that happened, and even this evil that one is sadly continuing to persist and is but hopefully being, revealed, there's this truth being uncovered, but also these lives, this trauma being rehashed and brought up for a lot of people who have repressed or done whatever they can to try and forget this. And now their families are having to like deal with their own, like, no matter what kind of complicity it is, there some way where they were either turned a blind eye or just didn't realize what's happening to a family member, or some people like who were too young to even, who couldn't do anything to help people. What can you give them that can, and this is such a broad group of people I'm asking, but what could you give them in terms of comfort for how it can look going forward?
Okay. Let me pause a second while I think of my response.
No problem.
Because it's important. recently talking to my brother Tim, someone asked him a question about what happened to him, and he said, I would pay $1 million to get my childhood back. I would pay any amount. Um, and obviously that's not something he can do, any of us can do. What we have from the sister who watched a wrong, let's start with the direct victim, the sister who watched a wrong, a parent who realized their responsibility, a teacher who realized their failures, someone who wouldn't know, as a youth, wouldn't know the story until they were, 20 years later confronting this, is human resilience. That's the tool that allows good to come from suffering. And with a little faith in yourself, and from whatever source you get that faith, I still get it from God. Good can come from evil, because all resilience wants is the ability to make change. And if there's any good to come from the evil of what happened to my brother, in the telling of this story, is I want people to know we're here. We're still here. And we see us and we'll see you. And let's all do our best to achieve my brother's aim. Whether by a priest, a parent, a teacher, a coach. Let's not turn our eyes anymore. Let's keep them wide open. Let's open the doors. I sat there as a child in the hallway looking at my brother's door, knowing something was wrong. Let's open the door. And we all have that power.
Wow. What a powerful, powerful, powerful thing to say. And I hope anyone listening who needed to hear that, please pass it around to anyone who can hear that, just because those are words I think anyone and anywhere can benefit from hearing. Because the human resilience, the human resilience, the fact we can change, and the fact that we can, good does persist over evil, is so important to hear. It's so important to hear.
And we talked about revenge. Can I interrupt you just a second?
Yeah.
Which is what I really, there's an arc of this book from revenge to something else. And that's what I'm interested in the reader finding out, because what that arc is something I think we're all capable of. And I think we're capable of it because of resilience.
Yes.
So I'll leave it a little open-ended like that, maybe to keep people curious. But
yes, I mean, they should. If their interests aren't piqued, I don't understand it, because I feel like you all should be running to the closest bookstore right now to go grab a copy of this book, because it's wow, what a fantastic book. And I can't wait for the movie adaptation, where I'm seeing like Nicole Kidman with a gun in her hand heading to Rome. And
I'm trying to remember the name of the woman who plays Prentice in Criminal Minds, because that was the one I always thought I wanted to portray me. So,
oh my God, let's go to Hollywood. Let's get this made, because but in that action, I feel like we should go the full revenge route.
Okay, that's all right. That's why TV is different than fiction.
Yeah, exactly. No,
I mean,
thank you.
Nonfiction.
Nonfiction.
Yeah.
No, you're right. No, thank you so much, Joan. This has been a wonderful, wonderful recording, and I'm so happy we were able to. I'm so happy we could get you. A little inside the podcast process, listeners. This podcast has been in the works since the spring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
April, May, probably.
April, May. Yeah. And I mean, I've been looking forward to this since then. So thank you, thank you, thank you
Yeah.
so much, Joan. And to my listeners, go out and buy this book. When this episode comes out, you should the book will be available everywhere. Um, the book will be available to buy. Go to your local bookstore; they'll have it there. Come to Skylight; we'll have it right on display in our podcast display. So please, 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 please come and grab a copy.
Hey,
I
I can come into Skylight and sign a few when I'm there in a couple
Yes,
weeks.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yes. And
Yeah.
so get a signed copy, guys. Wow, you can't get better than that. You you can't. But no, Joan, do you have any last things you would like to say to our listeners in the independent bookstore community?
Well, I talked a lot here about being a lawyer, but one thing I call myself first is a writer. And I think you have to own it. And I think there are a lot of artists out there that if they have another job, they don't own who they actually are in their heart. So to every listener, you are an artist and pursue your art and your passion. To independent bookstores, there are so many books in the world. Thanks for keeping our stories alive, including the story of someone who is having their first book after a long, long time, achieving a long sought dream. Support your independent bookstore. And to you, Lance, I feel like I made a new friend. So thank you
Yes.
for bringing this story to your listeners.
No, and I feel like I made a new friend too, and I'm so happy to. I'm so happy that when we got to this is one of those what we're talking about. It's obviously a good thing because I'm so
Right.
happy one that I get to help get the stories to people, to reach to the ears of people who might not have come to the bookstore to grab it. But two, I'm glad I made a new friend selfishly. I'm glad I
Me too.
selfishly made a new friend today. But no, thank you so much, Joan. And thank you to all the listeners out there. Go do something nice for yourself today. Go, even if it's as small as going for a walk, do something nice and have a great and beautiful rest of your day. And have just I love you all. That's what I want to say. Love all my listeners out there. All right. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Skylight Books podcast series. Please don't forget to visit our website at skylightbooks.com and make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more author talks and bookseller conversations. You can find us on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you back in our store soon.